Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Timo Parker. I'm a vocal coach and I'm here to help you to improve your singing voice. Today I want to talk about volume and how to use dynamics with your voice in a natural way. And also I want to talk about where and why there are such big differences in volume. So let's dive right into it. So this is what happens for a lot of people when they start out, or sometimes also for intermediate students, that you sing and you start on a comfortable note, medium volume I would say, maybe speech level, and with higher pitch the volume also increases up to the point where the voice breaks and you go into something called falsetto and the volume gets much lower. So the sound changes dramatically, but also the volume. And there seems to be no way to change that and also to adjust volume to the desired level. So your voice pretty much works like a triangle where on the bottom you have the most power and the most volume, and the higher you go, the less power and the less volume you have. So in the lower register you have more volume and your voice sounds thicker, and on the higher register you thin out and you lose control. If this is you and you have the same problem as I just described, it is most likely that you use air pressure and falsetto to create notes. And in my first video on this channel I actually explain why you should not do that. I link it here, because those mechanisms not only prevent proper voice growth, but they can actually also harm your voice. So that's why it's really important to stay away from them. And in fact, I have a whole playlist about vocal anatomy and how you use your voice in a natural and healthy way, and also some exercises to get you started. So I'm also gonna link that here. If you missed them, just check them out. So the question would be, how should volume actually work in your voice? How can we use dynamics? If you use your voice in a proper way, in the way it was intended, this triangular shape will actually flip over from this shape to this shape. So that means the lower you are, the less volume you're gonna have, and the higher you go, the more the voice opens up and the louder it gets. And this happens because of tension on the vocal cords. I explained that in a different video here on this channel, but if you use your CT muscle to stretch your vocal cords in order to sing a higher pitch, you increase tension on them. That means with increased tension on your vocal cords, the pitch gets higher, but also the volume increases. So that means that your voice naturally wants to become louder in a higher register. But this can only happen if your vocal cords are thick enough, because you stretch your vocal cords so much up to the point where they don't meet each other anymore, because this band, this cord, vocal cord, gets stretched out so much and it gets very thin that between the vocal cords we have a gap and there's air coming through and the vocal cords don't meet each other anymore properly, which is not bad. It's not a bad thing if they don't meet each other anymore. It's a natural process that happens. And the only way to close this gap again is to train your voice regularly to make the vocal cords thicker. Because if there's more mass on the vocal cords, we can stretch them more and more and they still have more substance to them. So that means this gap occurs much later in your range. And that's why you can still create a full and strong connection with the vocal cords, because you train properly. If you, for example, use falsetto and air pressure, you don't really train your vocal cords to get thicker, and then you're always gonna have to rely on those two crotches in order to sing higher. And that's why it's so important to get rid of them as soon as possible. But if your vocal cords are not thick enough yet and you thin out in the higher register and it gets very airy, there's really nothing you can do, because this is part of the journey of the training. What you have to do is accept it and just continue training. So there's no immediate fix that you can do to make this gap close again. So that's why it's okay if the voice becomes more airy. But this is the journey that you have to start. So that means with increased pitch also the tension increases. But there's another thing that we can do to become even louder when we sing, and that is using chest voice. I also made a video about head and chest voice, you can check it out here. Basically what happens if we use chest voice is that we contract the vocal cords. In head voice they are not active, they just get stretched by the CT muscle. And because they contract while they get stretched, the tension increases even more. So naturally, chest voice is even louder than head voice, even in a higher register. If you haven't seen my head and chest voice video yet, where I compare those two voices, I would highly recommend to stop here and just watch the video to really understand what I'm talking about, because my definition is quite different to what you can find out there. So make sure you know what I'm talking about. But regardless of what voice you're using and what little adjustments you do or which muscle combinations are involved, your voice should always follow the shape of the inverted triangle, where you start with a lower volume on the bottom and the higher you go, the louder the voice naturally wants to get. And it's not the other way around where you start very strong on the bottom and on the top the voice loses the width and the volume. So these are some basic principles about volume and dynamics in the voice. But we singers have a secret weapon that we can use without actually amplifying the root note that we are singing. So that basically means that whenever we hear music and we hear one note, we don't actually hear just one note, we hear a series of 16 notes that layer on top of each other, and in result our brain recognizes it as this one note. And the thing is that with our voice we can amplify certain overtones that make us more audible. And those overtones roughly lay in the frequency range between 2800 to 3300 Hertz. And this is a range where no other acoustic instrument is very strong in. And that's why we can make ourselves very audible by amplifying those overtones. And the way we can do that is by opening up our laryngeal ventricle, which is between our vocal cords and false vocal cords. There's a little ventricle where the sound gets created. And if this one is very open, it is very likely that we create more overtones. The way we do this is by lowering our thyroid cartilage and also opening it up. You can find more info about that in the playlist that I linked here before. So that means instead of forcefully trying to amplify the root note that we are actually singing with air pressure, we relax and we open up our thyroid cartilage and our whole system in our body to amplify those overtones. And this way we're gonna be more audible without actually having to do much. And this is really important, that we learn how to relax while we sing, so we can really open up the spaces and use our instrument to its full potential. So these facts just give us an idea what's actually possible with our voice, but we also have to understand that this is a long process and it takes time to get there and to really master it. So don't get discouraged if something doesn't work, it's totally normal. We have to train and be patient. So how can we get started to level our volume in our voice? And the honest answer is you don't. Instead of being too fuzzy with the volume in your voice, you should really make sure that you don't use air pressure and you don't use falsetto in order to give your voice the environment to grow. And if you get rid of air pressure, you will realize that your voice will become much lower in volume than you're actually used to. And that's a normal process. And the only way to move past that is to accept it and keep training so your voice gets bigger and bigger over time. It is a bit like being a pianist or a guitarist who wants to play a very fast line or in a very fast tempo, and the only thing this person can do is just keep practicing and work towards that desired tempo. And this is the same thing with our vocal range and also with the volume. Unfortunately, volume is one of the slowest things that grow in your voice, but on the other hand, since it's a passive process that just happens with time, you don't really feel like you have to put a lot of effort into it. So your voice is going to be very loud and very strong without having to put too much effort into it, because all those muscles that we train gonna get stronger, and so will your voice, and that's why the volume will increase with time. But that's not something you can force. So acceptance is one of the biggest points if you want to grow your voice properly, to just take it where you're at and start training from there. So don't put too much attention into the volume, just make sure you use your right volume. A good strategy to find your relaxed and natural volume is to actually start from the note that is the weakest in your voice. And normally the weakest area we have in our voice is where the breaking point was or still is. So the thing where the voice would flip. This area is typically the weakest point in your voice. So try to use one of those notes as a reference. So if you take your air pressure away and you're not using falsetto and you get a sound in a very low volume, so this is what you should take as a reference note. Because if this is the weakest note and you take the other notes a step down volume wise, you will have one voice that is pretty similar in volume. Just make sure that you don't hold yourself too much back in the higher notes, and make sure to not give too much in the lower register. Because this is what normally happens, that in the lower register, because the volume is so low, we tend to overcompensate with air pressure, and in the higher register, because we are used to this voice flip, we take ourselves too much back and our voice is in higher risk to go into falsetto. So it's actually easier to sing forte in a higher register. So never push your voice into the extremes. That means don't be too loud in the lower register and don't be too quiet in the higher register, and try to find your individual volume that works for you. And as a reference, you can use the weakest note in your voice. And try to be very kind to yourself, be patient, and just keep training, because the voice will grow over time and you will have a greater range of volume that you can use. Your voice is gonna get more flexible and stronger. As always, the key is not to mask any problems, but rather address them directly, to get rid of them, because this is why we are training. We want to overcome problems and achieve the next stage, and this is what we have to do also when it comes to volume. Alright, I hope this video was helpful to you. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I have more voice training content planned on this channel, so make sure to not miss out on them. Thank you for watching, and I see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!